Mary Hartman. Wasn't it Mary Hartman who was mentioning all of the different times Don goes and hides when, cops are around, or he has to be put under the gun questioning. When things get tough, Donnie goes and hides. That's just something comical that Mary said, as if you remember the last time that we were talking about this, Chris's trip out to 110 Ben Hill Road. He brought up at the time that he thought he was almost certain that somebody was in the shed, and that somebody would have had to have been Don. Anyway, for whatever reason, Don felt the need to hide, although he's denied it. Now, it's not that important because they went on to have several different phone calls. That's not exactly what I want to talk about today. I just wanted to pull this clip up because I wanted to touch base on exactly what Jose Roman said in his particular interview, the one that he had with Justin from Clutch Them Pearls back some years ago. Just on a side note, I got sucked in over at Ernie Shell's channel. I was trying to figure out, because I was eavesdropping, I was listening in on Pandrew's channel last night, and somebody was mentioning how Ziggy was having a meltdown over a particular show, and I needed to go figure out what exactly that was all about. And wouldn't you know it, Ernie is, how should I phrase this? There's a combination of things going on here, and then I remembered exactly what the Summer Wells community, the greater community, is all about and how crazy it's gotten. Anyway, I will say that I've always been entertained by Ernie in that sense. I don't believe that anything over on his channel is necessarily meant to be anything but theater. However, he brings up, and he's got some great interviews historically with Candace Bly. Not that, and just that's it, regardless of what you think of him. He's got one of my favorites when she is staying at a friend's house, is one that I'm thinking in particular. Anyway, not to get too sidetracked, but he was calling out Ziggy and Fred Hill because he is trying to associate the latest tip from Van Hill Road, and this was from about 24 hours, 30 hours ago. He was trying to associate Ziggy with being the individual that somehow tipped this raid, this search party of this residence of supposedly one of his Fred Hill's relatives, just on November 13th. So Ziggy has a post on her channel denying all of this, but indeed she's got other tips that she's called about. And that's probably giving Ernie and everybody all they need to go and criticize Ziggy. Not that you want to discourage any tips. And Fred Hill has probably some information that he doesn't really know if it's relevant or not. So in theory, you can never really tell. I think where the problem comes in is when you turn around and you use that as part of what it is that you're doing on YouTube. Sometimes it might be better to keep things quiet for a longer period of time and refer to it in the future if you find it important. But when you use it in harmony with trying to promote and keep the interest up on your channel, then people tend to get critical about that. Like, who knows? I don't know. We don't know for sure and all of that, but there's all kinds of people that want to get sides and then, troll Ziggy over it, drive her nuts. And that's probably what Ernie was doing in that sense. I'm just kind of getting familiar with it now. That's what I would have to expect. And Ziggy went for it, hook, line, and sinker, because, well, she married Fred Hill. She married into the holler. She married into the holler. And God bless Fred. What a crazy scenario. Hey, if you guys are in love, dude's probably hung like a horse. Ziggy couldn't help herself. Anyway, who knows? But I think that's really all that it's about. So there's really no need for Ziggy to get upset, although she probably was. And Ernie knows how to get himself under the skin of certain individuals. You can always apologize. Oh, yeah. Awesome. And by the way, there's some comments in my live chat, people snapping and going off the handle. For whatever reason, I've banned them just straight away. I don't really care. They're just spamming nonsense. But I might have misspoke. I didn't even go back and check. Do you remember that comment about, in that LTL video about Dawn with the behavioral panel talking about I took her back or thereabouts? Well, I might have said bring her back in that sense when I'm trying to make a point. Irregardless of the exact words that were said, it's still leakage, okay? And the fact that he didn't finish the statement and repeated the question word for word, meaning, sir, or not, maybe he didn't do it word for word right there. That's not the point. My point is it's still leakage, okay? That was the point. It's leakage at that point in time when he's telling the story. Now, it's not important. The exact words in this particular statement aren't as important, other than in the video was identifying the leakage along with everything else about the timeline specifically. Wasn't trying to say that bring or took meant specifically anything to do with any particular theory or a person. It has, not you, Siri. It has everything to do with just identifying the point of deception within the statement. That's all. So there's this person, I can't even listen to you. I can't listen to you. There's such a huge difference between the two things I took or I brought back. Listen, you're the idiot, okay? Regardless of what the words were, it was still leakage. And what that means in this circumstance, it was revealing the truth in that sense. And he stopped himself. Doesn't matter exactly what he was referring to. It's impossible for the individual to tell because he didn't say anything. That's not the point. The point is it's a red flag, an indicator of deception. On a side note with that, I believe it's probably, if I had to hazard a guess, and I'm just speculating, I would have to say it had everything to do with how shady and wrong, and the trigger for Dawn would be the illicit relationship between Hunter and Candace in that sense. The inappropriate relations. And now Ernie Shell likes to think of himself as a predator hunter in all that sense. Well, dude, you're bringing up all of these individuals in the Beach Creek area in that sense that are on the offender registry. You don't have to introduce any strangers in this. The predator is within the household. And that's Dawn. And this is what brought me back to the Jose interview. Because it was an eyewitness account of the living conditions of Summer, the children, what everyday life was in the house. He rented a place in the basement. Sorry, I'll switch that back for the time being. Anyway, to finish that off, there's a escalation ladder in place here within the family, Dawn and Candace. When I say intra-familial, ABUSE, and escalation, there's 8 steps to that. And I don't want to repeat them here because we're supposed to be talking about Jose. But within all of the information that we've learned or come to learn about the situation up on Ben Hill Road, it would indicate that the inappropriate relations between Dawn and Summer and Candace escalated. There was a cycle of abuse within the house that escalated to the point of unaliving Summer in the circumstances. And Candace, every step of the way, has clammed up because she's being coached by the perpetrator, and she's scared at the end of the day of her perpetrator, and she's protecting him. And that's my message to Ernie. So you can apply all of these great skills that you've accumulated, Skern Dog, to the situation at hand without introducing strangers into this and embellishing and really enabling the perpetrator all along. So I guess Ernie's skeptical of Fred. I think he's just putting Fred through the ringer because he does have information and it's relevant to the situation. And this is his way of gathering some of that. See, he likes to incorporate things that he probably doesn't necessarily truly believe, and he's good at it over on his channel when it comes to, like, for example, in this scenario that he was mentioning Ziggy reporting and being responsible, her and Fred, for this latest November 13th report on the Van Hill raid. He's mentioning organ harvesting and that being a motivating factor within this crime in this circumstance. Like, I mean, Ernie, you can do so much better than that because there's so much pertinent, relevant information available to you. You're overlooking the obvious. Look, you're letting the person who you're after fool you. And all of this, Mr. Child Predator, protecting all children at all costs. I love you, Ern, but I mean, there's so much you could do with the reality of the situation. Anyway, let's get on with things. Let's talk about Jose Roman. Like, it has me thinking that maybe Ernie doesn't recognize. Well, I guess that's kind of the point to this video then. In order to interject that intra-family escalation. So really, think about what we know about the Jose Roman situation and how it could have contributed to escalating this in a faster manner. So when we talk about the key drivers that make the abuse, whether it be towards Summer or we'll just call it Dawn's poor behavior in this sense, because I don't want to trigger the algorithm. So substance abuse by the caregiver, which it could be alcohol, drugs are the two biggest accelerators. The mathematics, associate that with what happened over, I feel, in the Jack and Lily Sullivan situation with Daniel. The second key driver is presence of a non-related adult in the house, like mom's new boyfriend, dad's new girlfriend, statistically the most lethal combination. So we've got substance abuse going on within the household. We know this. Dawn and Candace at 110 Ben Hill Road. And the presence of a non-related adult in the home, like a person like Jose Roman. A person who's been reported by several witnesses as having an amorous or romantic relationship with Grandis, and they were fighting over Jose in that sense. And then when he wanted and it was getting too weird for him, he started letting them know that he, I guess that official quote, or that now famous quote of "I like chicks with dicks" statement came in. He was trying to throw that down there to shake them and get the hell out of there. Who knows? I'm just joking, of course. But 3, another key driver would be prior child welfare involvement that was closed. So the family learns how to hide bruises and coach the children in this circumstance. We know that there was an ongoing relationship between Child Protective Services and the residents at 110 Ben Hill Road. So, number 4, another key driver that makes the cycle escalate not cycle, but makes the intra-familial abuse escalate that much faster would be the child reaching the age of memory, which is the age of 4 to 6 years old, and Summer in this circumstance was 5. So the abuser realizes the child will remember and then in turn tell on them. Maybe that's a contributing factor in this as well. Probably, most likely. Child begins to resist or disclose. This is another key driver. This is a single most common immediate trigger for a fatal scenario. So no doubt this same cycle that we're referring to in the household, when Don learned about Jose, he drove back from Utah in that sense and confronted, there's a big confrontation at the home that night that was leading to Grandis having to call the police on Don, and further charges were pressed at that point, I believe, and it was later dropped. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened in the situation. It already happened. We can identify the ABUSE there. You don't need formal charges. And this is what we're talking about. And Jose was a part of this, so of course it's relevant to the situation. So let's see what Jose had to say. I keep saying that. Let's see. So here we are in the basement. This is an image from the interview room with Chris McDonough. Speaking about Jose Roman, taking a look and pulling from the transcript from the interview that he did with Justin. A little summary here of the key statements made by Jose will go as follows. His accounts paint a picture of severe neglect, abuse, and dysfunction in the Wells household. He positions himself as a temporary renter who was paying rent to stay in the basement. He observed and interacted with the family, including Summer, her brothers, Wayland Wyatt, and an older brother, Candace, the mother, and Don, the father, and Candace's mother, Grandis, or Grandma Candy. So he goes on to say, in regards to the living conditions and the household setup, the home was filthy with roaches everywhere, piles of unwashed dishes, mattresses on the floor, no proper beds. For example, the parents' mattress was on cinder blocks. It's a rustic look. The bathroom was makeshift and behind dressers. The basement in this cellar where we are now was unfinished with plywood floors, no windows, and poor ventilation. There's no air circulation in there at all, is there? Maybe a little fan upstairs. So here's what stood out to me that's very interesting. I'm going to look into it after I finish this video. This is Jose talking about the blue couch, possibly a sofa bed. It was placed in the front of the basement door to block the children from exiting. Jose emphasizes this was to prevent kids like Summer from wandering out, contradicting parental claims that the door locked securely. Very interesting. So that would indicate to us that they were making that bedroom, it wasn't an entrance and exit anymore. It was blocked off. So it was leaving the basement as just like a holding cell with access from the roof only, like an access to a dungeon. Anyway, children slept in makeshift arrangements. The boys were on couches or upstairs bunk beds, Summer and others on the floor mattresses. The basement was Jose's room, but doubled as the kids' playroom. The outdoor hazards he mentioned were poisonous snakes like copperheads, beehives, We need more of those. Overgrown, but not exactly up in our eaves troughs. Overgrown lawn. The pets around there, like the dogs and cats, were neglected, and some of the cats were dying from snake bites. Oh my God. Some of the family dynamics. Don Wells, he talked about, was portrayed as abusive in that sense. He was an alcoholic and manipulative. Jose describes Don drinking daily, such as beer on the way home from work, and black velvet whiskey mixed with Mountain Dew, which is fairly specific. Don was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, calm in public and raging behind closed doors. Frequent F-bombs, fights with Candace, and incidents included throwing a beer bottle at Jose, chipping his tooth, leading to a physical altercation and a police call. Don was arrested for a DV and gun possession as a felon. He was spanking Summer publicly, pulling down her pants for wandering, whipping a belt on the table to threaten the boys over a cupcake fight, slapping or throwing the children, and he unalived a kitten, which was Summer's pet, by throwing it to the dogs in front of her, traumatizing her. That's terrifying. That is so terrifying. Look at that. There he goes, harming animals again. Oh my God. He talks about Candace Bly as emotionally broken from Don's abuse and cheating. Jose claims she confided in him. Example, his 2-week rug binges in Mexico. She was neglectful, for example, poor feeding and hygiene, but not as physically aggressive as Don. Jose denies a romantic relationship with her, claims platonic emotional support, but admits a one-time romantic encounter with Allie, who is the family friend, Hunter's mother. Now, he talks about Grandis lived on the property in that camper and helped out but enabled the dysfunction. Jose said she talked to Don on the phone, making him jealous about Jose's presence. See there? Jealousy being a factor in this escalation. The children, he said, were neglected, fed junk food like dollar store pizzas and chips, no real meals until Jose cooked for them. He performed housework before eating. Pranks like shaving cream on sleeping kids, which was causing them tears to tear up, cry. Summer was energetic, loving, unconditional, and she wandered freely. For example, outside at 7:30 a.m. alone. Intelligent, she could open doors. She hated shoes. She was often in her pajamas and muddy. She slept anywhere. For example, like the milk jugs or in a truck bed. I don't know about that. I never heard that. But the point there was she was sleeping anywhere. She didn't have a bedroom in that sense with a closing door and some privacy away from 3 brothers. The other issues in the house was the rug use, Don's mathematics and Coca-Cola binges, neighbors smoking math openly, neighbors smoking the mathematics openly. He told a story about that, didn't he? Don's DUIs, probation violations. Jose helped clean, cook, and care for the kids, and he regrets not calling authorities. Like CPS here. So Jose expressed deep regret, rest in peace. He had emotion. He was crying about Summer and insists his accounts are truthful, offering to testify as well, by the way. So Jose Roman was having issues in life, and it led to several relapses with substances, which I believe were a contributing factor in his passing. He was struggled with his mental health. He was depressed, anxious, full-blown alcoholism. This is before and after Tennessee. But I wanted to point out, pulling from Chris McDonough's interview, he mentioned he met Andrew Hiltz, who's Hunter's dad, 4 to 5 years after moving upstate. In 2020, he joined a group move, which was Andrew, his wife, 2 kids, Jeff, and a partner, plus 3 kids, and another couple in a rented van. And the goal with this was to escape personal issues. They claimed a place in Tennessee, although nobody's ever been able to track down exactly what place they actually were looking at, because according to them it fell through. They were using Andrew's brother Bonesy. He had an accumulation of money from something or other. Was it a retirement fund or something? I can't remember, but it was all on his cost, and everything fell through. So they ended up turning around and going right back to New York at that time. So at the time he was doing the interview with Chris McDonough, he says he was living in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and he was dropped off by Grandis there after leaving Tennessee. He denies the RSO rumors, that he's an RSO, and wants to clear his name and help the case in that sense. Apparently there's also a Jose Angel Roman who's on the list in Utah. It was mentioning. I went to take a look at it. I didn't find it. But he's also was outed as a transvestite selling his booty digitally over the internet. Now, whether he was legitimately doing that or he was catfishing or doing something, I don't know, but he was on, and it was taken from a legitimate site for that sort of degenerate behavior. Now, again, we're pulling from the transcript from Chris McDonough's interview of Jose Roman. And Jose described on that particular occasion a chaotic, abusive household, and he lived there 9 months in total. He arrived January in 2020 and left in October, about October 15th, 2020, after that altercation with Don. Speaking of Don, he portrayed him as controlling, manipulative, angry, alky, frequent fights with Grandis. So there you go. There you go right there. Frequent fights with Grandis. Prioritized drinking over family needs. He was physically aggressive. Example, the altercation with Jose over food and money. He's got a history of CSA himself, but Jose does. And so does Don as an alleged perpetrator of it. Jose feared violence if Don returned. Talked about Candace as an enabler, scared of Don. She came across to him as scared of Don in that sense. Well, I would imagine. But she stayed for the housing. She's described by Jose as nervous and concerned about Don's return. Involved in daily chaos, but not directly as abusive in the sense that Don was. And I would assume that means physically. Now, talking about Grandis, Candy's mom, she had clashes with Don, called him a control freak. She drove Jose to South Carolina and promised to enforce protection order against Don. Promised to enforce a protection order against Don. What does that mean? Talking about the kids, Jose's references, including the pre-disappearance summer, often unsupervised. The kids were. They played hide and seek often. Summer, 4 at the time, was precious, happy but in a dysfunctional environment. The boys roughhoused a lot. They had a house full of dogs which were aggressive to strangers. Talked about the dynamics within the household. Jose referenced them as it being overcrowded, it being really set up as a crash house full of rugs, alcohol, and fights. Jose helped with chores and the kids, but drank heavily himself. The group move involved 10 people in a truck with furniture, such as a couch. He mentioned it, but the fate of all of this is unclear. He didn't, from his perspective, he split off from them and went and moved in with Candace. Was it because he fell in love with Allie? Or what was going on there? He's probably drunk. Let's see. Jose saw Summer as innocent and just in a bad environment. The kids wandered a lot, especially playing hide and seek. Dogs would alert to strangers. He didn't actually witness any direct ABUSC, but implied neglect. And he left 8 months before the disappearance in that sense. So 8 months after this blow up, I wonder what the next blow up was. This situation with Hunter, I'm expecting. See, it seems to me that there's some dishonesty going on, even with how they portrayed the situation with Hunter. Like, what business does Candace have of even going over there and picking her up? Like, we could never get to the bottom of that. And even when you got it from Allison's perspective or Sherry's, they just took it like, well, Candace is asking Hunter to go hang out with the kids in that sense, when in fact she was grooming him and engaged in drinking booze, and he was just getting into that age group. And listen, she is a predator in that sense. When it comes to Hunter, I believe it was an inappropriate one-way street, and Hunter didn't really recognize the inappropriateness of it because he was just happy to get away from his family, the craziness from over there, and go and hang out in another environment without giving it much thought.